At JFK Airport, Lauren Taylor, a UN diplomat, was accused of forging her own passport, officers refusing to believe a black woman could hold such power. Humiliated but unbroken, she exposed their prejudice, unleashing consequences none could predict. What happened next will shock even the most jaded. But let's start at the beginning. Lauren Taylor exuded confidence and elegance as she stepped into JFK International Airport, her tailored navy pantsuit highlighting her professionalism and the composure honed from years of navigating high-stakes diplomacy. At 42, Lauren had built an impressive career as a United Nations representative, advocating for global human rights with the poise and determination that had earned her respect on international platforms. Her striking appearance, a rich brown complexion, sharp almond-shaped eyes framed by long lashes, and a sleek bob of jet-black hair, radiated authority and warmth. Clutching her diplomatic passport, its blue cover a symbol of her position, Lauren entered the bustling customs line. She walked with purpose, the leather soles of her pumps clicking softly against the tiled floor. Though exhausted from a grueling week of negotiations in Geneva, she maintained an air of vigilance, her posture upright, her steps deliberate. The weight of her work, addressing the rights of marginalized communities, gave her an unshakable sense of purpose. At the customs desk, the officer barely glanced at her before flipping through the pages of her passport with an exaggerated deliberation. His brow furrowed, and his lips pressed into a thin line. When another agent was summoned, Lauren felt the subtle shift in the atmosphere, a silent judgment cloaked in feigned professionalism. "Ma'am, we need you to step aside for additional screening," the officer said. The clipped tone and lack of explanation raised an alarm in Lauren's mind, but she complied without argument. Years of experience had taught her when to push back and when to gather her footing. Inside the glaringly lit screening room, the scrutiny intensified. Two officers, their expressions steeled with suspicion, examined her passport. One declared it counterfeit, with an accusatory flourish. Lauren's jaw tightened. "This passport is issued by the United Nations," she stated, her voice calm but firm. "Verify it." Her words met with derision. "Diplomatic? From you?" one officer sneered. It wasn't about the passport. It was about her identity, her skin, her presence in this space. Lauren realized she was fighting more than just their disbelief. She was confronting a system steeped in bias. Alone in the sterile room, her resolve hardened. This was not the first challenge she'd face, nor would it be the last. But she would not let this go unanswered. The minutes dragged into an agonizing hour as Lauren Taylor sat in the cold, fluorescent-lit room. The sterile surroundings seemed to amplify the silence, broken only by the faint hum of the overhead lights and the occasional murmur of voices outside the door. Her polished demeanor was slowly giving way to frustration, her fingers tapping against the table in a rhythmic display of impatience. Each time she asked for an update, the officers returned with vague assurances. "It's under investigation," they repeated, dismissing her requests with a wave of the hand. Lauren could feel their sidelong glances through the window, the whispered exchanges and occasional smirks making it clear they weren't in any rush to resolve the issue. Finally, the door opened, and an officer entered, flanked by two uniformed police officers. Their stiff postures and stern expressions set the tone before they even spoke. "Ma'am, we believe this passport is forged, and we'll need to detain you for further questioning," the lead officer said, his voice edged with accusation. Lauren's jaw tightened, her frustration boiling over into indignation. "This is unacceptable," she stated firmly, her eyes blazing with conviction. "My passport is legitimate, and I demand you contact the United Nations immediately. Their contact information is on file." One of the officers raised an eyebrow, his smirk betraying his mocking tone. "Oh, you're from the UN now?" "Sure. Let me just call the Secretary General," he said with exaggerated sarcasm, eliciting laughter from his colleagues. Lauren didn't flinch. Her gaze pierced through the officer's condescension. "I won't let your ignorance and prejudice dictate this situation. Call my office, or I will escalate this matter." The laughter stopped abruptly. The officers exchanged uneasy glances, sensing that Lauren was not someone to be easily intimidated. As they stalled further, Lauren discreetly retrieved her phone from her tote and dialed the UN security office. Her voice was calm, but commanding as she outlined the situation. One of the officers noticed and lunged for her phone. "You can't use that here," he barked, snatching it from her hand with unnecessary force. Lauren's expression didn't waver. Her voice was steady, sharp, and deliberate. "You've made a serious mistake," she said, her words like steel, "and you're about to regret it." Half an hour later, the sterile tension in the small screening room was shattered by the arrival of a team of United Nations legal representatives, their tailored suits and polished demeanor commanding immediate respect. They entered the room with purposeful strides, their expressions grim and unyielding. The airport supervisor followed closely behind, his face a mix of concern and embarrassment as he took in the scene. The smirks that had lingered on the officers' faces earlier dissolved into unease. One of the UN representatives, a tall woman with piercing gray eyes and a no-nonsense tone, stepped forward and placed a thick folder of documents on the table. "This passport is not only authentic," she said icily, her words cutting through the room like a blade, "but Ms. Taylor is a high-ranking diplomat, protected under international law. Any further detention will constitute a serious violation." The officers fumbled for words, their earlier bravado replaced by nervous stammers. "It was protocol. A misunderstanding. We were just following routine checks," one officer managed, his voice faltering under the icy glares of the UN team. Lauren, now flanked by her legal representatives, stood tall. Her expression was steely, her eyes burning with indignation. "Let's not pretend this was about protocol or my passport," she said, her tone sharp and deliberate. "This was about your prejudice and assumptions. You saw a black woman in a position of power, and you couldn't believe it." The room fell silent, her words slicing through the weak excuses. The airport supervisor, clearly mortified, stepped forward, wringing his hands. "Ms. Taylor, on behalf of the airport authority, I deeply apologize for this misunderstanding. We will conduct a full review." Lauren didn't let him finish. "This isn't just about me," she said firmly, her gaze never wavering. "I expect accountability, not empty apologies. This behavior reflects a system that needs to change." With her team ensuring her belongings were returned, Lauren walked out of the room, her steps resolute. The anger simmering in her chest was matched only by her determination. This incident wasn't isolated. It was a symptom of a larger, systemic problem, and she intended to use her platform to expose it. Lauren wasted no time. Within days, she had filed a formal complaint against the officers, backed by the UN and civil rights organizations. The media caught wind of the incident, and Lauren's story made headlines. News outlets highlighted the systemic bias and racial profiling she had faced. Interviews with Lauren went viral. "This isn't just about me," she told one journalist. "It's about the countless people who endure this treatment without the resources to fight back. It has to stop." Public pressure mounted. The officers involved were placed on administrative leave, and the airport launched mandatory bias training for its staff. Weeks later, Lauren stood before a packed auditorium at a human rights conference. "Prejudice thrives in silence," she said. But when we stand up, speak out, and demand change, we can dismantle even the most entrenched injustices. The audience erupted into applause. Lauren had turned her ordeal into a catalyst for change, proving that even in the face of discrimination, resilience and courage could pave the way for progress.